Henry's children. Well, the children had their tree house and a big chestnut by the creek where they alternated between calling it a fort or a pirate ship, and sometimes it flew the Jolly Roger and other times the flag of Fort Apache. But whatever it was their castle. When the rope ladder was withdrawn, they were secure from all attack. The log raft that Brent and Jeff built rode at anchor in Sycamore Creek, awaiting its next Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn adventure. The hole at the lower pasture was deep enough to swim in, and after Henry and the boys had spent a hot day in the hayfield, Esther would often fix a lunch and meet them at the swimming hole for a picnic and swim. The children roamed the farm, and they knew every spot and named them all for future reference. They delighted in talking of those secret places in front of company, just to see their faces filled with consternation when they spoke of Dead Horse Gulch or Rim Rock Trail. And there was also Crabapple Point, Persimmon Forest, Lover's Lane, Indian Cove, Honeysuckle Jungle, Locust Ridge, or Bobcat Junction, each named affectionately, bestowed in keeping with some peculiar characteristic of that place, or some exciting thing that happened there. In the winter, beside the open fire, while green locust logs sizzled or persimmons seeped, Henry and Esther listened as the children recounted the summer's adventures at Oak Point, or a horse race on the hill flat that explained why they stayed so long that day when Henry sent them after the horses. They rattled on about the rabbit box they set in the orchard and caught a chipmunk instead, and the day Brent fell out of the mulberry tree when he was supposed to be looking for the cow. There were tea parties by Hilda with her dolls in the side yard shade in summer, with clover and honeysuckle trumpets to suck the sweetness from, or perhaps a few green apples with salt and some wild berries for dessert. On Sunday afternoons there were croquet tournaments that lasted all summer, and no one ever remembered what the actual score was. An all-summer champion was declared in the fall, with his record duly challenged for the next summer. Nobody worried too much about exercise, for one turn around the lower pasture after Daisy the cow was equivalent to 5 miles of jogging. Or one trip over Oak Point and his 40 acres of brush to chase and corral a stubborn calf, or an afternoon rabbit hunt was enough exercise for anyone. For Esther, she was glad for a time during a day when she could just sit a while in the high-back country rocker and rest, while the coffee pot sang its bubbling melody and Old Brown groaned contentedly by the stove. Winter evenings were special treats, with an apple log sizzling happily in the fireplace. There were domino and checker games, chess, and games on paper. There were tongue twisters, puzzles, and brain teasers, as well as Indian wrestling on the floor, with Henry ending up taking on all the kids at once in a free-for-all that left Esther wondering if the china cabinet would survive the crash, as Henry at last toppled to the floor like a giant, with little people swarming over him like flies. Esther would often read aloud from Snowbound, if the snow was drifting against the house, or Kidnapped, Treasure Island, or the favorite of the boys, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. There were poems like Little Boy Blue that always made them cry, but best of all and long remembered were the make-up stories about ghosts and monsters that roamed the Salem Pike, which were followed by the earnest question, did that really happen? Or is that really true? Sometimes on fall nights, with a full harvest moon to light the way, they took a late-night hike through the corn shocks with Hilda hanging tight to Henry's arm. Strange how, after a scary story, that cornfield, harmless in the daylight, became so foreboding as the moon cast its shadows on the neat rows of shocks, and by the magic of its light turned them into hostile Indian teepees, and each pumpkin at its base seemed to be daubed with war paint as the flickering shadows played tricks on imagination and eye. After a hot bath in the steaming water from a whistling kettle, and good-night kisses and prayers, the children marched bravely to the cold upstairs to be lovingly tucked under heavy homemade comforts and quilts. There in the darkness, with noses chilled and imaginations running wild, every creaking board in the old farmhouse became a creeping ghost, coming in to carry them off, and the weird whispering of the pines in the front yard were sighing spirits of fallen braves, and the heavy smell of wood smoke from the fireplace downstairs the positive proof of their campfires.